Vijayanagara, the capital, and its environs. So, finding out about the city in the box, a large number of inscriptions of the kings of Vijayanagara and their Nayakas recording donations to temples as well as describing important events have been recovered. Several travelers visited the city and wrote about it. Notable among their accounts are those of an Italian trader named Niccolo di Conti and an ambassador named Abdul Razak sent by the ruler of Persia, a merchant named Afanasi Nikitin from Russia, all of whom visited the city in the 15th century, and those of Duarte Barbosa, Domingo Pius, and Fernão Nunes from Portugal, who came in the 16th century. And Source 3, a sprawling city. This is an excerpt from Domingo Pius' description of the Vijayanagara. Okay, so water resources, river Tungabhadra, which flows in a northeasterly direction. So the most striking feature about the location of Vijayanagara is the natural basin formed by the river Tungabhadra, and the most important such tank was built in the early years of the 15th century and is now called Kamalapuram tank. So in almost all cases, embankments were built along these streams to create reservoirs of varying sizes. We are studying about the water resources, and here in this box we have about a tank constructed by Krishnadeva Raya. Pius wrote something about this tank, and one of the most prominent waterworks to be seen among the ruins is the Hiria Canal. This canal drew water from a dam across the Tungabhadra and irrigated the cultivated valley that separated the sacred center from the urban core. This was apparently built by kings of the Sangama dynasty. Second is fortifications and roads. So before we examine the different parts of the city in detail, let us look at what enclosed them all. The great fortress walls. Abdul Razak, an ambassador sent by the ruler of Persia to Calicut, present-day Kozhikode, in the 15th century, was greatly impressed by the fortifications and mentioned 7 lines of forts. Okay, what was most significant about this fortification is that it enclosed agricultural tracts. So, what do you think agricultural tracts were incorporated within the fortified area? Why do you think agricultural tracts were incorporated within the fortified area? Often, the objective of medieval sieges was to starve the defenders into submissions. So, these sieges could last for several months and sometimes even years. So normally, rulers tried to be prepared for such situations by building large granaries within fortified areas. The rulers of Vijayanagara adopted a more expensive and elaborate strategy of protecting the agricultural belt itself. A second line of fortification went around the inner core of the urban complex, and a third line surrounded the royal center, within which each set of major buildings was surrounded by its own higher walls. And in the figure, we have a gopuram and a gateway in the fortification wall. So archaeologists have studied roads within the city and those leading out from it. And these have been identified by tracing paths through getaways as well as by finds of pavements. Roads generally wound around through the valleys, avoiding rocky terrain. Some of the most important roads extended from temple getaways and were lined by bajas. Now we move on to the urban core. So, tombs and mosques located here have distinctive functions, yet their architecture resembles that of the mandapas found in the temples of Hampi. So, this is how the 16th century Portuguese traveler Barbosa described the houses of ordinary people which have not survived. The other houses of the people are thatched, but nonetheless well built and arranged according to occupations in long streets with many open places. And the royal center was located in the southwestern part of the settlement. Although designated as a royal center, it included over 60 temples. And the Mahanavmi Dibba, located on one of the highest points in the city. The Mahanavmi Dibba is a massive platform rising from a base of about 11,000 square feet to a height of 40 feet. And there is evidence that it supported a wooden structure. The base of the platform is covered with relief carvings, figures 7, 12. In this figure, you can see the Mahanavmi Dibba. So, rituals associated with the structure probably coincided with Mahanavmi, literally the great ninth day Navami of the 10-day Hindu festival during the autumn months of September and October, known variously as Dasahara, Northern India, Durga Puja in Bengal. And here are the carvings on the Mahanavmi Dibba, an elevation drawing of the Lotus Mahal. So the Vijayanagara kings displayed their prestige, power, and suzerainty on this occasion. The ceremonies performed on the occasion included worship of the image, worship of the state horse, and the sacrifice of buffaloes and other animals. Dances, wrestling matches, and processions of caparisoned horses, elephants, and chariots and soldiers, as well as ritual presentations before the king and his guest by the chief nayakas and subordinate kings marked the occasion. Other buildings in the royal center. One of the most beautiful buildings in the royal center is the Lotus Mahal, so named by the British travelers in the 19th century. In this figure, you can see the detail of an arc of the Lotus Mahal, and this is the photograph of the Lotus Mahal. So one suggestion found in a map drawn by Mackenzie is that it may have been a council chamber, a place where the king met his advisors. While most temples were located in the sacred center, there were several in the royal center as well. Sculpture from the Hajara Rama temple, and one of the most spectacular of these is one known as the Hajara Rama temple, interior of the audience hall at Madurai. So this was probably meant to be used only by the king and his family. The images in the central shrine are missing, however, sculpted panels on the wall survive. Hajara Ram temple, and it includes scenes from the Ramayana sculpted on the inner walls of the shrine. The sacred center choosing a capital. So we now move to the rocky northern end of the city on the banks of the Tungabhadra. According to local tradition, these hills sheltered the monkey kingdom of Bali and Sugriva mentioned in the Ramayana. Other traditions suggest that Pampa Devi, the local mother goddess, did penance in these hills in order to marry Virupaksha, the guardian deity of the kingdom, also recognized as a form of seva. So all royal orders were signed as Sri Virupaksha, usually in the Kannada script. Rulers also indicated that their close links with the gods by using the title Hindu Surat Rana. This was a Sanskritization of the Arabic term Sultan, meaning king, so it literally meant Hindu Sultan. An aerial view of the Virupaksha temple, plan of the Virupaksha temple. So Gopurams and Mandapas. In terms of temple architecture, by this period, certain new features were in evidence. These included structures of immense scale that must have been a mark of imperial authority, best exemplified by the Raya Gopurams or royal getaways. So we first look at this temple. So temple building in the region had a long history going back to dynasties such as the Pallavas, Chalukyas, Hoysalas, and Cholas. And you can find more about the Virupaksha temple and Kalyana Mandapa meant to celebrate divine weddings, a line drawing of a sculpted pillar. And this is it about the Virupaksha temple. So Virupaksha temple was built over centuries, while inscriptions suggest that the earliest shrine dated to the 9th, 10th centuries. It was substantially enlarged uh, with the establishment of the Vijayanagara Empire. The hall in front of the main shrine was built by Krishnadeva Raya to mark his accession, and this was decorated with delicately carved pillars. Another shrine, the Vitthal temple, is also interesting. Here, the principal deity was Vitthal, a form of Vishnu, generally worshipped in Maharashtra. So, the introduction of the worship of the deity in Karnataka is another indication of the ways in which the rulers of Vijayanagara drew on different traditions to create an imperial culture. So, just as the Nayakas continued with and elaborated on traditions of fortification, so they did with traditions of temple building, a Gopuram built by the Nayakas of Madurai, plotting palaces, temples, and bazaars. In 1976, Hampi was recognized as a site of national importance. Then, in the early 1980s, an important project was launched to document the material remains at Vijayanagara in detail through extensive and intensive surveys using a variety of recording techniques. So, it is worth remembering something that John M. Fritsch, George Missel, and M.S. Nagaraja Rao, who worked for years at the site, wrote in our study of these monuments of Vijayanagara, we have to imagine a whole series of vanished wooden elements, columns, brackets, beams, ceilings, overhanging eaves, and towers decorated with plaster and painted, perhaps brightly. So lots of lost elements. Plan of the figure, the bazaar. Okay, so meat was sold in abundance in the marketplaces. Nunez describes mutton, pork, venison, partridges, hares, doves, quails, and all kinds of birds, sparrows, rats, and cats and lizards as being sold in the market of Bisnaga, Vijayanagara. There was a question formed on this for now Nunez. So that's why I'm reading this from the box. Now let's move on to the questions in search of answers. So buildings also tell us about the spread of ideas and cultural influences if we compare them with buildings in other places. They convey ideas which the builders or their patrons wished to project. They are often suffused with symbols which are a product of their cultural context. And Krishna Deva Raya in the box. And investigations of architectural features do not tell us what ordinary man, woman, and children, comprising the vast majority of the people who lived in the city and its outskirts, thought about these impressive buildings. So I think this is the end of this chapter, and the timeline portion at the end of all these chapters is quite important. So I'm going to read the timeline one, major political developments. So circa 1200 to 1300, establishment of the Delhi Sultanate, 1206. Then circa 1300 to 1400, establishment of the Vijayanagara Empire, 1336. Then came the establishment of the Bahmani Kingdom, 1347. Then the sultanates in Jaunpur, Kashmir, and Madura. Now circa 1400 to 1500, establishment of the Gajapati Kingdom of Odisha, 1435, and establishment of the Sultanates of Gujarat and Malwa, emergence of the Sultanates of Ahmednagar, Bijapur, and Berar, 1490, circa 1500 to 1600, conquest of Goa by the Portuguese, 1510, collapse of the Bahmani Kingdom, emergence of the Sultanate of Golconda, 1518, establishment of the Mughal Empire by Babur, 1526. Timeline 2, landmarks in the discovery and conservation of Vijayanagara, 1800. Colin Mackenzie visits Vijayanagara, 1856. Alexander Greenlaw takes the first detailed photographs of archaeological remains at Hampi, 1876. J.F. Fleet begins documenting the inscriptions on the temple walls at the site, 1902. Conservation begins under John Marshall, 1986. Hampi declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. So this is the end of this theme.